Well, you're here. You have the floor, Mr. Perkins. I'm told there'll be some speakers to this, so I think we'll begin right away. Mr. Perkins, you have the floor, please. Over to you.
I'm hoping that MP Khalid would be here because I know my words will sway her. But in the absence of that, the purpose of this motion is obviously we've had new information, but also a lot of fog around that new information about how it came to be that an individual with a declared conflict of about $12 million of business with SDTC, the Green Slush Fund, had gone through the appointments process with a great deal of speed and acceptance and ultimately been approved, and then ended up, based on the information provided by the Auditor General subsequent to a report, ended up with stated conflicts with about $35 million of projects handed out to companies that the chair had a conflict of interest with. And that 9 directors had a conflict of interest. 82% of all the projects the Auditor General sampled, the directors had a conflict of interest. To me, that's not representative of the green technology business. That's representative of a culture of entitlement and a whole culture of conflict. In fact, one director, Guy Ouimet, got enthusiastic about it and ended up having tens of millions of dollars of projects that he had a conflict in, brought forth back and approved by the fund, which he was a member of as a board member, as a government appointee, and admitted in the industry committee that he actually stayed in the room and voted for one of the projects himself, which was $4 million to a company he had financial interest in. And this process of how these continued appointments of people, as MP Cooper said, it appeared that one of the qualifications, it's all I can see, one of the qualifications required to be appointed to this board is that you have a conflict. Not that you don't, but that you do. And so we need to see the sausage making behind this decision. Minister Bain said, and when he appeared, I'm responsible for appointments, but when the appointments came around and the performance of the appointments came around, he pointed at PCO 9 times in his testimony as being the people who crafted up the list, not him, although he did admit that he called some of them. Now, we've heard some interesting information today that it appears that the letter that was signed by PCO that went to Minister Baines contains 6 names. Now, why that's interesting is because the president, former president of the Liberal Green Slush Fund, Leah Lawrence, in her testimony said that the minister's office, Baines' minister's office, and the ADM who sat on the board from the industry department, ADM Noseworthy, told her to only search out 2 names. So we have this testimony that says the minister has the ability to pick off that list, to vet them, tells the president to only go after 2 of now the 6 that we know were presented. And we know from testimony of the president that when she checked out the 2, one of them said, I have a conflict, so it's inappropriate for me. And the other said, I have a conflict, but it is appropriate for me. And that's the one that went forward over the objections of the CEO. And that Minister Baines recommended that to Cabinet. And we've had today PCO officials say that Cabinet would know that people who are being appointed have a conflict of interest before they do it. Yet they did it anyway. And we end up with this situation where $390 million with these Liberal appointments has gone either inappropriately outside of the terms of their funding by Parliament, or in most cases, $330 million went to companies they had a conflict with. So the only way that we can get to the bottom, or at least the next layer of intrigue in how did taxpayer money get so abused, is to actually get the documents that my motion has asked for. So just to be clear, what that is, again, in my motion, that we're talking about the advice letter, the one that PCO signs from a committee that includes departmental officials and includes the Prime Minister's office, that they signed off on 6 names that went to former Industry Minister Baines, by the way, who was responsible for reducing cell phone bills and now works for the most expensive cell phone company in the world, ironically, Rogers, when he decided clearly through whatever vetting process that he admitted to in committee that he did, that out of that list he only wanted two conflicted people to be considered and vetted by the president, and then chose the one that was left standing when the other one withdrew. He didn't clearly go back to the other 4 that were on the list that PCO gave him. So somebody, because of his testimony, said, others were telling me to do this, told him that the one they wanted was Annette Vacherian. I suspect we have this massive PMO appointment secretariat that every appointment goes through. All the MPs here know this. All the Liberal staffers here know this. People like me who've served in staff members' roles in government know the role that PMO appointments plays. No appointment gets made without the vetting and approval of PMO appointments. The senior person in PMO appointments was referenced by PCO. And in some cases, it's the Prime Minister ultimately that reviews that list to make sure that the Prime Minister himself is comfortable with that list. So we have a clear line of responsibility of a hand-picked chair by the Prime Minister, his office, out of a list recommended by PCO, of somebody in the Ethics Commissioner's report says she was approached to be the chair. She didn't apply. According to the Ethics Committee approach, she was approached. Now, she may have applied after the minister's office phoned her and said, okay, I'll send my paperwork in through the site, meeting the technical requirements of this clear, open, and transparent process. But at the end of the day, in the Ethics Commissioner's interview with her, she said it was the minister's office that approached her to be chair. That was the first time she had heard of it. So we have a lot of obfuscation, fudging going on, trying to bury the facts going on. I understand why they want to bury the facts when $390 million of taxpayer money went missing. That is, to put it in perspective, almost 10 times more than the sponsorship scandal under the Liberal Chrétien government, which was $42 million, had a public inquiry where people went to jail as a result of that, and $42 million. And where the CFO from the industry department said this was a bigger scandal than that, which is clear. Yet government members are trying to downplay and say, this is just the way business is. It's okay to appoint people with conflicts. And you know what? They got out of the room. So here's how it worked. Michael, Larry, and I are on the SDTC board. Guess what happens? They disclose by testimony, by written testimony and verbal testimony, and by the Ethics Commissioner's report. They disclose at the beginning of the meeting, Michael, my fellow board member has a conflict on this one, so he may or may not leave the room. Michael chooses to leave the room. Goes out. Miraculously, when Michael comes back, his project he has a conflict with gets approved. Oh, look, Larry voted for Michael's. Now Larry's got a conflict because it was declared at the beginning of the room. Larry, out of the room. Larry goes out of the room, and Michael and I approve Larry's project. Michael comes back in, and congratulations, Larry. 82% of the 226 projects that the Auditor General reviewed, 186, if you're following the numbers, 186 of 226 projects the Auditor General reviewed, these board members were conflicted. They didn't represent 82% of the technology, green technology business. They didn't represent that. They were using the board to feather their own interests. So we need the minutes, we need the letter, and we need the communications in order to clarify this mess about how this happened. And I would urge all members, including government members, who I know believe in transparency, who I know are not happy with the fact that $390 million has been identified as conflicted, want to get to the bottom of the truth and support this motion.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yip, I see your wish to speak. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Our witnesses have already confirmed that these documents have been submitted to the House, so I don't see the need to duplicate the work here. In fact, I can even read that motion that shows that it's been already put forth. Standing Order 81, paragraph 16, the House proceeded to the putting of the question on the main motion as amended of Mr. Scheer, Regina Appel, seconded by Mr. Perkins, South Shore, St. Margaret's, that the House Order of the Government Sustainable Development Technology Canada and the Auditor General of Canada each. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I think I have the wrong motion here.
Mr. Perkins thinks you have the right motion. Ms. Yip, would you like me to come back to you? I can put you on the list.
Yes,
Ms. Yip, I can.
back on the list. I'm sorry,
All right.
I thought I had the right